Malik Townsend settled into seat 1A, the plush leather cushioning familiar beneath him. He pressed his headphones, his mom's last gift, gently over his ears, letting the whisper quiet hum of the engines drown out the world. Golden afternoon light spilled through the window, dust motes dancing in its glow. Around him, first-class passengers adjusted pillows or scrolled through tablets, blissfully unaware of his story. A single, deliberate tap on his shoulder jolted him upright. Malik looked up at Darla Quinn, her uniform immaculate, apron crisply ironed. Her eyes, cold as steel, locked onto his. "Take off those headphones," she ordered, voice low, but cutting through the cabin hush. He hesitated for a heartbeat. Those headphones held more than sound. They held memory. Softly, he slipped them off. "They're noise canceling," he murmured. "I'm not playing anything." Darla's expression didn't soften. She leaned in, examining his boarding pass as though it were a prop in a plea. "A safety protocol," she repeated. "Remove them now." Malik's fingers closed around the ear cups, folding them neatly in his lap. He recalled his mother's words. "Strength speaks in silence." Around him, bones emerged, lenses clicking. He met Darla's unyielding gaze with deadly composure, an island of calm under an incoming storm. Malik slid his mother's headphones into his backpack with deliberate care, tucking the cord around the soft leather case. He kept his head down as Darla Quinn stepped back into the aisle, leaning into a younger attendant. "Kids these days," she hissed, voice low but sharp, "act like they run the show." The other attendant offered a half smile and shrugged. Without warning, Darla turned on her heel and marched straight back to Malik. She knelt beside his seat, picking up his boarding pass as though it were evidence. "Townsend," she said, voice measured, "first-class passenger." She held the card out at arm's length, eyes flicking over every detail. "Who booked this?" Malik's pulse quickened, but he said nothing. Around him, a white teenager in row 3 bobbed his head to loud music. No reprimand. A hush fell over the cabin as Darla's gaze shifted from Malik's ticket to his quiet professor. He felt the weight of every pair of eyes, curious, judgmental, indifferent. When Darla finally dropped his pass back onto his tray, her lips curved in a dismissive half smile. She stood straight, smoothing her uniform skirt. Malik offered a polite nod and returned his gaze to the window, holding on to the memory of his mother's calm voice. "Your silence is your strength." He sat perfectly still, letting the injustice settle around him like dust in the golden light. Malik glanced to his left and noticed a teenage boy, white, earbuds in, head nodding along to a hip-hop beat, completely ignored by the crew. The boy tapped his foot in rhythm, oblivious to any instructions. Malik's fingers tightened on the armrest as Darla strolled past him without a second glance. She didn't say a word, not a whisper, about the boy's noise, only the cold dismissal of Malik's presence. A middle-aged woman in a silk scarf shot Malik a curious look, then shrugged and returned to scrolling through her tablet. The only sound was the soft click of seatbelt signs and the low murmur of small talk. Malik studied the window frame, tracing the curve of the clouds beyond. The same sky that had carried his mother away last year. He remembered how she'd whispered, "Find strength in your silence," before she fell ill. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining her voice guiding him. Around him, cameras still flicked on, lenses hunting for drama. But Malik stayed still. No flinch, no outburst, just a quiet determination radiating from the calmness of his posture. In that hushed cabin, his silence spoke louder than any protest ever could. Malik felt the weight of every silent witness. A woman 2 rows ahead, silver hair tucked in a neat bun, cardigan draped over her shoulders, tilted her head and frowned as she watched Darla's back disappear down the aisle. Then she tapped her wristwatch and turned back to her magazine, as if the moment never happened. Beside Malik, a 12-year-old boy in a designer polo bobbed his head to booming music in his Beats headphones. He laughed softly at something on his tablet and never looked up. The contrast was brutal. Innocence celebrated, dignity dismissed. Malik's heart tightened, but he stayed still. He traced the seam of his seat cushion with a fingertip, recalling his mother's gentle smile whenever he felt out of place. This was exactly how he'd felt when she lay in that hospital bed, seen, then quickly forgotten. Around him, luggage wheels hummed, flight attendants whispered, and the murmur of small talk filled the cabin with brittle calm. Malik met the woman's eyes one last time. She looked away, embarrassed by her own indifference. He breathed in deeply, steadying himself. No tears would fall. No outburst would come. In that hushed, gilded cabin, his silence was not defeat. It was steel. Malik's phone buzzed in his lap, jolting him from his quiet vigil. He pulled it out and saw a single message from LP office. Flight lands at 3:50 p.m. A black SUV will meet you at gate default. Love, LaDonna. His breath caught. LaDonna Price, his godmother, had never texted him like this before. Growing up after his mother's death, she'd been the steady hand guiding him through every milestone. Now, in the middle of this tense cabin, her words felt like a lifeline. Around him, the cabin hummed with the clink of service cards and hushed conversations. Darla's presence had vanished, but the tension lingered like static in the air. Malik stared at the text again. Gate D-Fiend was the private terminal, reserved only for VIPs. His chest tight with a mix of gratitude and reluctant pride. He remembered LaDonna's calm explanation when she took him in. Family looks out for one another, even when the world tries to forget. He slid the message closed and tucked the phone back into his pocket. He wouldn't brandish his safety net, but knowing it was there steadied him. As the seatbelt sign flickered off, Malik straightened in his seat, folding his hands in his lap. He wasn't just a silent target. He was family to a force few could ever challenge. And that truth settled around him, quiet but undeniably powerful. Just as Malik eased back into his window seat, Darla reappeared, this time flanked by the cabin's purser, a stout man with a clipped demeanor. She pointed at Malik with surprising finality. "Sir, there's been a non-compliance issue with your onboard electronics. I'm going to have to ask you to deplane." The purser produced a small laminated card. "For safety reasons, if you can't comply with crew instructions, you must disembark. Do you understand?" Malik's pulse hammered, but his voice remained steady. "I removed my headphones when asked," he said softly. "I've followed every instruction since I boarded." The purser's mouth tightened. He flipped through his tablet, eyes darting between the screen and Malik's calm face. Around them, first-class passengers leaned forward, forks suspended midair. The cabin suddenly hushed. Malik could feel his hands trembling on the armrests, but he forced himself to sit tall. He remembered his mother's quiet strength. Stand firm in who you are, even when they mistake your silence for weakness. The purser closed his tablet with a soft click. He cleared his throat. "Very well. You'll need to step off at the jet bridge. Security will assist you there." Malik nodded once. No argument, no shout. He rose, extinguishing the cabin lights with his resolve, and began the walk that would change everything. Malik's shoes tapped softly on the jet bridge as he followed the purser and a security officer. He kept his head high, each step echoing in the narrow corridor. He was leaving the plane, but returning to the world he knew best. his godmother's protection. At the threshold, a figure stood waiting. LaDonna Price wore a tailored navy suit, her posture precise, arms folded calmly. The security officer paused, gave Malik a polite nod, and stepped aside. LaDonna didn't smile or rush forward. She simply extended her hand. He hesitated, then placed his small palm in hers. Her grip was firm, no words needed to convey her power. Finally, she spoke in a measured tone. That was the first time they disrespected our family on this tarmac. It won't be the last, unless we make sure of it. Malik's breath caught. He looked up into her cool, calculating eyes. She wasn't angry. She was already planning every move. Around them, duty-free shoppers passed by, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the plane's door. He folded his headphones into his jacket pocket, feeling their weight shift from grief to resolve. LaDonna slipped her hand into his and guided him toward the waiting SUV. In that silent moment, Malik realized this was only the beginning, and that power truly spoke in actions, not words. Hours later, Vista Air's corporate headquarters buzzed with alarm. In a glass-walled conference room, CEO Marcus Reed stared at his smartphone as an urgent memo scrolled across the screen. Effective 00 tomorrow. Access to terminals 3, 5, and 7 at Townsend Airport is suspended pending review. Estimated revenue impact $320 million over the next 2 quarters. Reed's hand tightened around his coffee mug. He looked up to see the CFO, Elena Sanders, pale and unsettled, pacing in front of a digital map pinpointing the affected gates. "How did this happen overnight?" she hissed. Down the hall, operations managers huddled around a cluster of screens showing incoming flight schedules. One of them whispered, "We'll have to reroute 5 daily departures. Ground crews and catering are already panicking." In the trading room, word spread like wildfire. Traders watching Vista Air's stock ticker saw the share price dip 2 points in minutes. Analysts began speculating on catastrophic contract failure and regulatory fallout. Back in the conference room, Reed finally spoke, voice tight but controlled. "Call every partner. Explain the situation. We need solutions. Fast." His gaze hardened. They had underestimated one family's quiet power. Now, Vista Air scrambled to contain a financial blow far bigger than any PR team could spin. In that moment, the airline realized this wasn't just a bad day. It was a reckoning. By midday, the viral video had exploded across every platform. A passenger's shaky footage, Darla Quinn glaring down at a calm young black teen, filled news feeds with the headline, "Flight Attendant Accused of Singling Out 15-year-old, Citing Fake Safety Concern." Anchor desks pounced. Reporters dug into airport records, noting that the boy's seat, 1A, belonged to Townsend Terminal, named for a beloved community doctor who died tragically in that same building. Social media lit up with outraged comments. How dare they treat her son that way? And this isn't safety, it's racism. Before Vista Air could draft an official apology, the fallout hit hard. 2 regional airports that had just signed multi-year service contracts pulled the plug. Emails from their procurement teams read, "Effective immediately, contract terminated due to ethical concerns." Analysts on financial networks labeled it a cascading PR crisis. Inside the Vista Air war room, executives scrambled to silence the uproar. Press releases promised internal review and renewed training, language that rang hollow against millions of views. Meanwhile, Malik's name trended beside hashtags like #Townsend_Justice. The airlines realized too late that their smallest act of prejudice would unravel into a full-blown public reckoning, and that the silent boy they'd dismissed was the catalyst. By early evening, Vista Air's internal discipline hit fast and hard. An overnight memo landed in every employee inbox. Effective immediately, Flight Attendant Darla Quinn is placed on unpaid suspension pending investigation. Operations Director Mark Ellis is terminated for failure to uphold our service culture and ensure fair treatment of all passengers. The bulletin spread through the terminals like wildfire. Ground staff at Townsend Terminal paused to read the screen updates on their handheld devices. Cabin crews trickled into break rooms and whispered among themselves, some in relief, others in stunned silence. At headquarters, HR Director Simone Carter circulated a leaked draft of the company-wide statement. Individual misconduct cannot jeopardize the commercial integrity of our airline. We are committed to accountability at every level. Executives nodded grimly as they approved the language. There'd be no golden parachute here. Darla would face the full weight of protocol, and Ellis's departure would send a clear message. Prejudice has real consequences. Outside, social feeds buzzed that the villain had finally been unmasked and sidelined. For Malik, the news reached him via a congratulatory text from Xavier. "They're cleaning house, little brother." He smiled quietly, folding his mother's headphones into his bag. Proof that sometimes the system itself can wield justice in deliberate, uncompromising silence. Malik stepped out of the SUV and into the soft glow of the Charlotte evening. The city lights shimmered against the dusk sky as he made his way up the front steps of his family's brownstone. Inside, the house was quiet. Xavier was out late at a planning meeting, and LaDonna was still at the office. Malik paused in the foyer and slipped off his jacket, draping it over the coat rack. He carried with him more than the weight of his backpack. He carried a promise. In his room, he closed the door gently and sank onto the edge of his bed. He reached for the leather-bound journal resting on his nightstand, his mother's handwriting flowing across the cover. Malik's thoughts in code. Flipping to the final page, he reread her last entry, the ink smudged by tears. She never let him see. "You don't need to shout. Let them hear truth in the silence you keep." A quiet tear slid down Malik's cheek, but he didn't brush it away. Instead, he tapped open his laptop and created a new project folder. Lines of code appeared on the blank screen as if they'd been waiting for him. He typed method names first: record incident, upload testimony, analyst bias. He wasn't writing a manifesto. He was building a tool, a simple web app where travelers could log moments of unfair treatment, tag location, date, and context. No flashy interface, no dramatic banners, just a clean form, a database, and an algorithm trained to spot patterns of bias. Outside his window, a car door closed softly. Malik paused, looked up at the city skyline, and let the hush settle. In that calm, he felt his mother's presence, a steady encouragement to turn pain into purpose. He leaned back, eyes bright with resolve, and whispered to the empty room, "They'll listen this time." Then his fingers moved faster, weaving silence and code into a quiet revolution that no one could ignore. 6 months later, the air at Townsend Community Center buzzed with a different energy, one of hope and accountability. Under a banner reading "Townsend Fund Launch," LaDonna Price stepped up to the podium, flanked by Malik and Xavier. Flashbulbs popped, but she spoke in her trademark calm voice. "Today, we dedicate resources to families who face discrimination in travel, because no one should feel invisible." A round of applause rippled through the crowd of community leaders and journalists. Milik exchanged a glance with Xavier, pride shining in his eyes. After the ceremony, reporters pressed him for details on the web app he'd quietly built. He explained how Bias Tracker, his simple AI platform, analyzes passenger feedback to flag unfair treatment before it escalates. No sensational headlines, just data. Incident counts, location heat maps, and real-time alerts to crew supervisors. By fall, several regional airlines had integrated Bias Tracker into their training programs. Malik got an unexpected call from the Department of Transportation. They wanted to pilot his tool at 4 major hubs. He declined public ceremonies, choosing instead to email his code directly to officials. That evening, Malik and LaDonna walked through the empty terminal named for his mother. Soft overhead lights illuminated the polished floors. He removed his headphones for a moment, listening to the gentle hum of progress. In the hush, he felt his mother's presence more strongly than ever. His silence had become their legacy, and a quiet revolution that would endure long after any headline faded.